Welcome to the 700 Club. The Congressional Committee investigating January 6th Capitol Hill riot began making their case against President Trump yesterday, and they did it in an unprecedented manner to a primetime audience.
Republicans called the committee partisan and illegitimate. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke brings us this look at the opening hearing.
The January 6th committee seeks to prove the existence of a coordinated, multi-level effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election and the peaceful transfer of power. During Thursday night's hearing, members made their case to the American public.
President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
We need backup.
The committee promised never-before-seen video, audio, and evidence, and that included recorded testimony from former Attorney General William Barr and Trump's daughter Ivanka.
Repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud, and that would have affected the outcome of the election.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr, so I accepted what he was saying.
Two witnesses appeared before the committee Thursday night. U.S. Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards, injured on January 6th, and Nick Quested, a filmmaker who followed the Proud Boys while capturing the day's events.
I documented the crowd turn from protesters to rioters to insurrectionists.
I'm trained to detain, a couple of subjects and handle a crowd, but I'm not combat trained. And that day, it was just hours of hand-to-hand combat, hours of dealing with things that were way beyond any law enforcement officer has ever trained for.
Republicans call the committee's findings partisan and illegitimate and held counter-program during and after the hearing to, quote, set the record straight.
The entire point behind this process is to prosecute Donald Trump for crimes that he did not commit. We all know this is a sham committee process. They want to put Donald Trump in jail. If they don't get that, they settle to keep his name off the ballot.
GOP conference chair Elise Stefanik accused Democrats of using the hearings to try to take attention away from what's really affecting the American people.
Inflation, sky-high gas prices, the border crisis, the baby formula shortage. That's what the American people care about. And Democrats know that they are losing on all of those issues because they've created their crises, their radical policies.
Trump made a statement ahead of the hearings, saying in part that January 6th, quote, represented the greatest movement in the history of our country to make America great again.
More than a handful of additional hearings are scheduled for this summer, but the question remains whether the committee's findings will do anything to change opinions or get the attention of a distracted American public. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
For more on this, we have our chief political analyst, David Brody. So, David, what do you think were the key takeaways from last night?
Well, I don't think it's an understatement to say it was not a good night for Donald Trump, for sure. Look, I personally, there was a lot to unpack here, Gordon. We can talk for hours about it. Why don't we just start with Ivanka Trump? I mean, that was the kind of the primetime special. In essence, she agreeing with Bill Barr. I say in essence because there was some ambiguity to it to a degree because we saw only 14 seconds of what Ivanka Trump was saying to the committee. At least that's what they released. But the fact that she agreed with Bill Barr that the election was not stolen, look, how is Trump feeling this morning after hearing that? So that was definitely one of my takeaways. And look, I thought the committee did what they needed to do, which is make this compelling case that the election was not stolen and that all of Trump's folks in his inner orbit were saying that. And I think that was probably the biggest thing to come out of it just from a political and even legal perspective here. As it relates to January 6th, I got to tell you, one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that the committee was selectively editing those videos. And that's not my take on it. It's not my hot take on it. It's true. I mean, if you look at that 12-minute video that they aired at the beginning of the hearing, there's so many examples, but I'll just give you one. There towards the end, in about 15, 20 seconds, they have Trump's voice saying, what a great crowd of people that came. What a great crowd of people. These are great Americans. And while you hear his voice from the rally that day, you see people storming the Capitol and go, well, that's not who he was talking about. He's denounced those people time and time again. What he was talking about was the tens of thousands that showed up on the Mall for that big Stop the Steal speech that day. So they went ahead and took his audio and put it over video of people that he wasn't talking about. That's just a good example of what they were doing. Look, it's all partisan. We know the deal. 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans who are not big fans of Donald Trump. I think voters are smart enough to kind of figure it all out themselves.
Well, I think the voters have already made up their minds about this. Most people have already formed an opinion on the election and on January 6th. And so is there any new evidence from last night that might change somebody's mind?
No, Gordon, that's a great point. No, everybody's made up their mind. Look, ultimately, this is about a couple of things. One, it's about the political calculus, if you will, in 2024. In other words, Democrats are hoping for 2 things. One, they hope that they can somehow get a criminal referral out of this to somehow, what they would love is, they always say lock her up about Hillary. They want to lock him up. I mean, that's ultimately what they would love to do. Don't think they're going to get that. But what they'll take at this point is Donald Trump not being able to run in 2024. They're trying to lay that case out from a legal perspective. I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on television. I really don't play one on television. I just play an anchor. But the bottom line is that's the deal. So they've got that as kind of where they're looking at it. And also, Gordon, what's really important to understand here is that the case that they're making is, in essence, that if Trump does get on the ballot and does run, they want to take some of that, whether it be evangelical support or whether it be some of that independent support that he received in 2020 and 2016, for sure, away from him so he wouldn't even be able to get into the White House because he'll lose again.
Well, I'll put you on the spot then, because you are a real anchor and a real political reporter. So I'll put you on the spot. What? I missed that.
Oh, real makeup. I've got real makeup as well.
Okay. If the election were held today, so let's fast forward to 2024, who do you think the nominees would be and who do you think would win?
Donald Trump would be the nominee because Donald Trump's going to run for president of the United States. I don't think there's any question about it. I literally asked him that question and I said, what would stop you from running? He said, maybe a bad call from a doctor. He's going to run. So he will be the nominee. And I know there's a lot of talk about DeSantis, but there's also a lot of talk about DeSantis just staying put in Florida because there's a lot of work to do there. And plus he's younger. And so Trump will be the nominee. I still think Biden's going to be the nominee. And here's why, because where is your bench? Exactly. You don't have a deep bench if you're the Democrats. Kamala Harris, her own party doesn't like her. So then where do you go exactly? So it'll be Biden, Trump. Again, I believe in a rematch. And I got to tell you, you want that prediction. Gordon, I can't give you a prediction in 2022 in June, but I know you'll hound me. So look, I'll just simply say this, that if Donald Trump wins, the reason he will is that he should, in essence, give an in-kind donation to Joe Biden because this economy, from gas to milk, is out of control. And that could help Trump in and of itself.
All right. David, thanks for the analysis and thanks for being with us. In other news, the UN Human Rights Council has released a report on Israel that's been condemned as biased. It examines the war between Israel and Hamas in May of last year. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
After last year's 11-day war, the UN Human Rights Council established a commission to investigate the conflict, although its mandate went much broader.
It's unprecedented in terms of scope, in terms of geographic location, and most significantly in terms of timing. It's meant to look at the root causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict stemming from the war last May, but it is something that can go back to before 1948 when Israel was established and in perpetuity into the future as well.
The 18-page report delves into the overall Israeli-Palestinian conflict and concludes by placing the blame on Israel. It states that the findings and recommendations relevant to the underlying root causes were overwhelmingly directed towards Israel, and the report therefore reflects this. Even though Hamas and other terror groups fired more than 4,000 rockets into Israel, the report cites Hamas only 3 times and Israel 157. There is also no mention of Iran, which funded and armed Hamas during the war.
We love Hamas! We love Hamas!
At the Geneva UN headquarters, Israeli attorney Nitzana Darshan-Leitner led a demonstration against the report.
To come and expose the real face of the Human Rights Council of the UN, compare them to not other but terrorists. In the end of the day, both the UN Council and the terror organization have the same goal: to destroy the state of Israel. The UN is using diplomatic means, fake reports, blood libels, and the terror organization using military means, terror attacks and missiles against Israel.
Darshan-Leitner says the council has 10 agendas, and one is devoted just to Israel. Its commission of inquiry is unique among all other UN bodies, since it's mandated to release an annual report on the Jewish state.
They want to essentially employ what is a form of lawfare, using international law as a political means to delegitimize and attack the state of Israel.
The International Legal Forum, along with 25 other organizations, released a report singling out the head of the commission.
You know, Navi Pillay has already accused Israel of apartheid, of war crimes, of crimes against humanity, and this is the woman that is meant to be adjudicating our supposed guilt or innocence.
The report is expected to be voted on by the UN General Assembly to accept or reject the report during its fall session, and it may be sent to the International Criminal Court. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Here's the underlying subtext of this incredibly biased report from the UN. The underlying thing is they don't think Israel has a right to exist. They took it all the way back to 1948, and they're saying the root cause of the Palestinian conflict in all of these so-called human rights violations, the root cause is 1948 and the existence of Israel. Now, I remind the UN that the UN passed a resolution recognizing Israel, and in that allowed them to create a state. And the United States was one of the first countries to recognize that Israel has a right to exist. The Jewish people have a right of self-determination. That's been around since the San Remo Conference all the way back in 1920. So you look at all of these things, and the UN, this commission is now going against established international law and established UN law. So what to do about it? Well, other than protest it, the deck seems to be stacked against Israel, all these commissions specifically targeted to them. And we're all getting set up for what the Bible predicts, that one day all the nations of the world will gather and say, we're going up to Jerusalem and we're going to take Jerusalem. That's something I don't look forward to, but we seem to be getting set up for it.